He thought she was just another black woman in the wrong neighborhood. He didn't know she was the FBI agent investigating his boss. When Officer Hargrove pulled the trigger on his abuse of power, he didn't expect the woman behind the wheel to expose everything. What started as a routine traffic stop turned into a takedown that would shake the entire department and end the career of one of the most corrupt men in the city. Watch until the end. Because when karma rolls in with a badge, justice doesn't knock. It kicks the door down. The streetlight flickered like a dying heartbeat, casting jagged shadows across the quiet suburban road. Dr. Amara Johnson gripped the steering wheel of her modest sedan, her pulse steady despite the exhaustion clawing at her after a 14-hour day at the FBI field office. At 38, she was a force, black, brilliant, and unyielding, the kind of woman who made corrupt men nervous. Her current case, a probe into City Councilman Victor Grayson's dirty money, had already earned her enemies. She just didn't expect one to find her tonight. Blue and red lights sliced through the rearview mirror, a police cruiser tailing her with predatory intent. Amara's jaw tightened. She wasn't speeding. Her plates were clean. But in this affluent neighborhood, where her dark skin and sharp blazer stood out like a challenge, she knew routine stops were rarely routine. She pulled over, her FBI badge resting in her briefcase like a silent shield, and braced herself. The officer swaggered toward her window, his silhouette broad and menacing under the dim streetlight. Officer Daniel Hargrove, 45, wore his badge like a crown and his smirk like a weapon. His flashlight stabbed into Amara's eyes, deliberate and cruel, as he barked, "License and registration, Missy, now!" The word Missy dripped with condescension, a jab at her womanhood as much as her presence in his neighborhood. Amara's fingers twitched, but she kept her hands visible, her voice calm. "Officer, may I ask why I was stopped?" Hargrove's laugh was a low, guttural taunt. "You match a description. Suspicious vehicle. Don't get cute with me." His eyes raked over her, lingering with a leer that made her skin crawl. This wasn't just racial profiling. It was personal. A power trip from a man who'd built a career bullying women who dared to stand tall. Complaints about Hargrove's harassment of female motorists had piled up for years, buried by a precinct that protected its own. Tonight, he was itching for a fight, and Amara could feel it. She reached slowly for her license, announcing each move, but Hargrove's hand shot to his holster, his gun half drawn. "Don't move!" he snapped, voice thick with menace. Her heart thudded, not from fear but from the sickening realization. This was no random stop. A faint buzz from Hargrove's burner phone, tucked in his pocket, confirmed it. A text he didn't want her to see. "Make it quick, she's the one," it read, sent from a number tied to Grayson's inner circle. Amara didn't know it yet, but this was a setup, a calculated move to smear her, to spark a scandal that would strip her FBI badge and bury her career. "You think you belong here?" Hargrove sneered, his gun now fully drawn, the barrel glinting under the streetlight. "Let's see some ID that isn't fake, sweetheart." The word sweetheart was a slap, meant to degrade, to reduce her to nothing. Across the street, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a 70-year-old widow with a phone trembling in her hands, started recording, her lens catching every second of Hargrove's cruelty. Amara's eyes locked on his, her voice steel. "You're making a mistake, officer. A big one." Amara Johnson's breath was steady, but her mind raced like a storm. The barrel of Officer Daniel Hargrove's Glock hovered inches from her face, its cold steel catching the faint glow of the streetlight. His sneer was a blade, cutting deeper than his words. "You think you're smart, don't you, Missy?" he spat, the word dripping with venom, a deliberate jab at her womanhood. Amara's hands stayed frozen on the steering wheel, her FBI training, anchoring her against the rising tide of fury. She knew men like Hargrove, Cops who thrived on power, who saw a black woman in a blazer as a threat to their fragile egos. But this wasn't just prejudice. Something in his eyes, a glint of calculated malice, told her this was personal. "Officer, I'm reaching for my badge," Amara said, her voice calm but edged with steel. She moved slowly, her fingers brushing the briefcase on the passenger seat. Hargrove's grip tightened on his gun, his knuckles white. "Don't try anything stupid," he growled, stepping closer, his bulk blocking the driver's side window. The air was thick with his aggression, a mix of racial disdain and something uglier, misogyny so blatant it made her skin crawl. She'd read his file months ago, buried in a stack of complaints during her corruption probe. Hargrove, a 20-year veteran, had a rap sheet of dismissed allegations, female motorists harassed, a female rookie officer driven out of the precinct after he sabotaged her. Each time, his buddies in blue had looked the other way. The thought made Amara's blood boil, but she kept her face neutral. Losing control now would play right into his hands. Her fingers closed around her FBI badge, its leather case cool against her palm. She held it up, the gold shield glinting in the flashlight's beam. "I'm Special Agent Amara Johnson, FBI," she said, each word deliberate. "You're making a serious mistake." Hargrove's eyes flicked to the badge, and for a moment she thought she saw doubt. Then his lips curled into a mocking grin. "FBI? You?" He laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that echoed in the quiet street. "Nice try, sweetheart. What did you do? Buy that off eBay?" The gendered slur landed like a punch, designed to belittle, to strip her of authority. It wasn't just her race he was attacking, it was her audacity to be a woman in power, a woman who refused to shrink. Across the street, Mrs. Evelyn Carter's hands trembled as she held her phone, the camera capturing every second of Hargrove's cruelty. The 70-year-old widow had seen too many injustices in her life to stay silent now. Her video zoomed in on the gun, on Hargrove's sneering face, on Amara's unflinching calm. "You stop that, young man!" Evelyn shouted, her voice cracking but fierce. Hargrove's head snapped toward her, his eyes narrowing. "Mind your business, old hag," he barked, his tone dripping with contempt for another woman who dared challenge him. The insult was a match to kindling, igniting murmurs from neighbors, now gathering on their porches, their phones joining Evelyn's in a chorus of silent witnesses. Older men in the crowd, retirees who'd spent decades respecting the law, clenched their fists, their faces darkening with outrage at Hargrove's disrespect. Not just to Amara, but to Evelyn, a grandmother who deserved better. Amara's heart pounded, but her training kept her grounded. She'd faced men like Hargrove before, colleagues who'd sneered at her in FBI briefings, local cops who'd questioned her authority at crime scenes. Each time she'd outsmarted them, her mind sharper than their egos. But this felt different. Hargrove's aggression wasn't just reckless. It was staged. A faint buzz from his pocket caught her ear, a burner phone vibrating against his utility belt. He glanced at it, his smirk faltering for a split second as he read the screen. Amara. Couldn't see the message, but she didn't need to. Her gut screamed, "This is a setup." Her ongoing investigation into Victor Grayson, the corrupt councilman, had rattled cages with connections to the police union. Hargrove wasn't just a loose cannon. He was a hired gun, sent to provoke her into a mistake that would end her career. "Officer, I'm going to ask you one more time to lower your weapon," Amara said, her voice low but commanding. "You're escalating a situation you can't control." Hargrove's laugh was colder now, his eyes glinting with something darker than arrogance, certainty. "Control?" he mocked, stepping so close his breath fogged the window. "You're the one out of place here, lady. This ain't your neighborhood, and you ain't no Fed." His words were a deliberate taunt, each one laced with the kind of misogyny that made her want to scream. She pictured the women he'd intimidated before, mothers pulled over on quiet roads, young officers humiliated in precinct locker rooms. The image fueled her resolve. She wouldn't give him the reaction he wanted. Her thumb brushed the edge of her phone, tucked in her jacket pocket. With a subtle press, she activated the recording app, a habit she'd developed after years of navigating bias in the field. Every word, every threat, was now captured. "You're on record, officer," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "And you're digging your own grave." Hargrove's smirk twitched, but he didn't back down. Instead, he leaned closer, his gun still raised, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You think you're tough, huh? Women like you always do. Until they break." The street was no longer quiet. Neighbors whispered, their phones lighting up the darkness like fireflies. Evelyn's voice rang out again, defiant. "I'm calling. Your precinct right now, you hear me?" Hargrove spun toward her, his gun wavering for a moment, his face red with rage. "Shut up, or you're next!" he shouted, the threat so raw it silenced the crowd. Amara seized the moment, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Officer Hargrove, you've just threatened a civilian while pointing a weapon at a federal agent. Think about what comes next." Hargrove's radio crackled, a dispatcher's voice cutting through. "Unit 214, report your status." He ignored. His focus locked on Amara, his ego blinding him to the trap closing around him. The burner phone buzzed again, and this time, Amara caught a glimpse of the screen as he fumbled to silence it. Push her. Make it messy. Her mind raced, connecting the dots. Grayson's people wanted a scandal. Her losing her cool, maybe even a physical altercation, anything to paint her as unhinged and discredit her investigation. Hargrove was their pawn, chosen for his predictable cruelty, his history of breaking women who dared stand up to him. But he'd miscalculated. Amara wasn't breaking. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, backup approaching. Hargrove's eyes darted toward the sound, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Amara leaned forward slightly, her voice a quiet challenge. "You're out of time, officer. Lower the gun, or you won't just lose your badge. You'll lose everything." His grip trembled, the weight of her words sinking in, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. Not yet. The streetlights flickered again, casting his shadow long and distorted, a man unraveling in real time as the neighbors' cameras rolled and the sirens closed in. The air crackled with tension, the distant sirens now a deafening roar, as two police cruisers screeched to a halt behind Officer Daniel Hargrove's vehicle. Amara Johnson sat rigid in her sedan, her FBI badge still raised, its gold shield a defiant rebuke to Hargrove's sneering contempt. His Glock trembled in. His hand, the barrel still pointed at her, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. The crowd of neighbors, their phones glowing like a jury of silent judges, had grown, their murmurs a low hum of outrage. Mrs. Evelyn Carter stood firm on her porch, her video capturing every damning second of Hargrove's aggression. His gun, his gendered slurs, his threat to an elderly woman who dared defy him. Amara's heart pounded, but her voice was a blade of calm. "Last chance, officer. Lower your weapon, or you won't walk away from this." Hargrove's smirk faltered, his burner phone buzzing again in his pocket. He fumbled to silence it, but not before Amara caught another glimpse of the screen. "Finish it. She's done." The message, sent from an untraceable number tied to Victor Grayson's network, confirmed her suspicion. This was no random stop. It was a setup to ruin her, to paint her as an unhinged black woman unfit for the FBI, all to protect Grayson's corrupt empire. Hargrove, with his history of harassing women, was the perfect pawn, a bully who relished breaking those who challenged his fragile masculinity. But he'd miscalculated. Amara wasn't breaking, and the crowd's cameras ensured his every move was exposed. The cruiser doors slammed open, and two officers stepped out, their faces taut with urgency. The lead, Sergeant Maria Lopez, a Latina veteran with a no-nonsense gaze, scanned the scene. Hargrove's drawn gun, Amara's steady composure, the neighbors' phones. Her partner, Officer Tom Reynolds, a younger cop with a wary expression, flanked her. Lopez's eyes locked on Hargrove, her voice sharp. "Hargrove, what the hell are you doing? Gun down now!" Hargrove spun toward her, his face flushing, red. "She's resisting. Says she's FBI. Bullshit." His voice cracked, the words she laced with misogynistic venom, as if Amara's gender alone made her claim laughable. Lopez's brow furrowed, her gaze flicking to Amara's badge, still. "Held high. That badge looks real to me. Stand down or I'll make you." Amara seized the moment, her tone commanding but measured. "Sergeant Lopez, I'm Special Agent Amara Johnson, FBI. This officer pulled me over without cause, drew his weapon unprovoked, and threatened a civilian witness." She nodded toward Mrs. Carter, whose phone was still rolling, capturing Hargrove's every flinch. "I suggest you verify my identity with the field office, and secure his weapon before he makes this worse." Lopez's eyes narrowed, assessing Amara's calm authority against Hargrove's escalating panic. She pulled her radio, speaking quickly. "Dispatch! Run a check on Special Agent Amara Johnson, FBI. Priority." Hargrove's bravado crumbled. "She's lying!" he shouted, his gun wavering but still aimed at Amara. "She's nobody! Just some woman causing trouble." The word woman was a sneer, a final jab meant to degrade, to erase Amara's power. It was a mistake. The crowd gasped. Older men in the group, retirees who'd spent lifetimes respecting law and order, clenching their fists, their faces dark with disgust. Hargrove's cruelty, his dismissal of Amara's authority, and his earlier threat to Mrs. Carter hit like a betrayal of everything they valued. Lopez's jaw tightened, her patience gone. "Hargrove, you're done. Drop it or—" "I'll drop you!" The radio crackled back within seconds. "Confirmed. Amara Johnson, FBI Special Agent, badge number 4729, active duty." Lopez's eyes hardened, and she stepped forward, her hand on her own holster. "Hargrove, you're under arrest for threatening a federal officer. Gun down. Hands up." Hargrove's face twisted in disbelief, his ego unable to process the reversal. He'd been so sure. Sure his badge protected him, sure his orders from Grayson's lackeys would bury Amara. But the neighbors' videos, Evelyn's steady footage, and Amara's unyielding composure had turned his trap into his own cage. Reynolds moved in, his cuffs glinting as he approached. Hargrove's gun lowered, his shoulders slumping, but his mouth kept running, spitting venom. "You're all in on it, aren't you? Her, this old lady, all of you?" He gestured wildly at Evelyn, who stood taller, her phone unwavering. The insult stung the crowd, fueling their anger, but it was Lopez who acted. In one swift motion, she disarmed Hargrove, wrenching the Glock from his hand and passing it to Reynolds. "Cuff him!" she ordered, her voice ice-cold. Reynolds snapped the cuffs on Hargrove's wrists, the metallic click echoing like a gavel. 2 minutes after Lopez's arrival, Hargrove was in custody, his face a mask of shock and rage, his power stripped by the women he'd tried to break. Amara exhaled, her hand still steady on the wheel. She stepped out of the car, her blazer crisp despite the chaos, and approached Lopez. "Thank you, Sergeant. Secure the scene and preserve that burner phone in his pocket. It's evidence." Lopez nodded, respect flashing in her eyes. She'd heard of Amara's reputation, the agent who'd taken down crooked cops and politicians alike. But she also caught a muttered exchange between Hargrove and Reynolds as they shoved him toward the cruiser. "Grayson won't let this slide." Lopez's gaze met Amara's, a silent acknowledgement that this was bigger than one rogue cop. Amara turned to Mrs. Carter, who'd lowered her phone but stood defiant, her gray hair glowing under the streetlight. "Mrs. Carter, you're a hero. Tonight," Amara said, her voice warm. Evelyn's eyes brimmed with tears, but she managed a nod. "Just doing what's right, Agent Johnson." The crowd murmured agreement, their phones still recording, ensuring Hargrove's downfall would spread like wildfire. Amara's eyes caught a crumpled note on the ground, dropped from Hargrove's pocket during the scuffle. She pocketed it discreetly, its scribbled address, a warehouse tied to Grayson's operations, confirming the conspiracy. Hargrove's overreach had backfired, exposing not just himself, but the puppet strings behind him. As the cruisers pulled, away with Hargrove in the back, his head bowed, Amara stood tall, her FBI badge gleaming in her hand. The neighbors watched in awe, their anger giving way to admiration. She'd faced a gun, a setup, and a man who hated her for her strength. Yet she'd won without firing a shot. But Amara knew this was only the beginning. Grayson's shadow loomed, and the note in her pocket was a map to the fight ahead. The B. Police cruiser's taillights faded into the night, carrying a handcuffed Daniel Hargrove toward a reckoning he'd never seen coming. Dr. Amara Johnson stood on the quiet suburban street, her FBI badge still clutched in her hand, its weight, both a shield and a burden. The crowd of neighbors lingered, their phones now lowered but their faces alight with a mix of awe and anger. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the 70-year-old widow who'd recorded Hargrove's cruelty, approached Amara, her eyes fierce despite the tears, streaking her weathered cheeks. "You showed him, Agent Johnson," she said, her voice trembling with pride. "Men like that, they think they own the world." Amara managed a small smile, but her mind was already racing, the crumpled note, from Hargrove's pocket burning a hole in her jacket. The address scrawled on it, a warehouse on the city's industrial edge, was a thread she couldn't ignore. This wasn't just about Hargrove's bigotry. It was a piece of a larger puzzle, a conspiracy to destroy her career. Amara drove to the precinct, her sedan cutting through the city's neon-lit streets. Her phone, still recording from the confrontation, held every word of Hargrove's misogynistic taunts. "Missy, sweetheart, just some woman," and his threat to Mrs. Carter. The audio, paired with Evelyn's viral video, was already spreading like wildfire online. The hashtag #ChJusticeForAmara trending on X. Comments poured in. "Disgusting cop. How dare he pull a gun on an FBI agent?" Older male users, veterans, and retirees posted furiously, their words dripping with outrage at Hargrove's disrespect toward Amara and Evelyn, a grandmother who'd stood up to a bully. The public's fury was a spark, but Amara knew it wouldn't be enough. Hargrove was a symptom, not the disease. The real threat was Victor Grayson, the corrupt councilman whose burner phone messages had orchestrated the stop. At the precinct, Amara filed her formal complaint, her report meticulous. Hargrove's unprovoked aggression, his drawn weapon, his gendered and racial slurs. She attached her recording and Evelyn's video, now downloaded by Sergeant Maria Lopez, who'd cuffed Hargrove with a look of grim satisfaction. Lopez met Amara in a cramped office, her face etched with respect but also unease. "Hargrove suspended pending investigation," Lopez said, sliding a file across the desk. "But you should see this." The file detailed Hargrove's history. A dozen complaints over 2 decades, most from women, motorists he'd intimidated, a female dispatcher he'd harassed into quitting, a rookie officer who'd left after he spread rumors about her competence. Each case was dismissed, buried by a precinct culture that shielded its own. Amara's stomach churned, the pattern as clear as it was vile. Hargrove didn't just hate her for her race. He hated her for her strength, for daring to be a woman, who outranked him. The thought ignited a fire in her, not just for herself, but for every woman he'd broken. Lopez leaned forward, her voice low. "I overheard him muttering about Grayson in the cruiser, said he'll fix this. You're onto something big, aren't you?" Amara nodded, her fingers brushing the note in her pocket. "Grayson's dirty, money laundering, bribes. police union ties. That stop was meant to discredit me, to kill my investigation. Lopez's eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. I'm with you, Agent, but watch your back. Grayson's got friends everywhere. Amara's mind flashed to her FBI supervisor, Agent Mark Reynolds, a mentor who'd warned her about Grayson's reach. She'd call him next, but first, she needed to follow the note's lead. Back at her apartment, Amara sat at her kitchen table, the warehouse address staring up at her. A quick database check confirmed it was linked to a shell company Grayson used to funnel bribes. The stop wasn't just harassment. It was a desperate move to scare her off, to spark a scandal that would paint her as unstable and force her suspension. Hargrove, with his history of targeting women, was the perfect tool. A cop who'd relish humiliating a black female agent whose ego would blind him to the trap he'd set for himself. But his overreach, drawing his gun, threatening Evelyn, had backfired, exposing the conspiracy's edges. Amara's thoughts drifted to her own history, the battles she'd fought to reach this point. A flashback pulled her back to her first year at the FBI, when a male colleague had sabotaged her case, whispering to superiors that she was too emotional for fieldwork. She'd proven him wrong, closing a high-profile case that earned her promotion. But the scars remained, each one a reminder of why she fought. Her phone buzzed, pulling her back. It was Reynolds, his voice urgent. Amara, that video's everywhere. The brass are livid, but Grayson's people are circling. They're already spinning this, saying you provoked Hargrove. Amara's jaw tightened. Let them spin. I've got his burner phone messages and this address. I'm going to that warehouse. Reynolds hesitated. Not alone. Take backup. Grayson's not just a politician. He's got muscle. Amara agreed, but her gut told her time was short. She grabbed her service weapon and headed out, the city's skyline a jagged silhouette against the dawn. The warehouse was a hulking relic, its windows boarded, its lot littered with rusted barrels. Amara parked a block away, her FBI vest under, her jacket, her senses sharp. She spotted a black SUV idling nearby, its driver a known Grayson associate from her case files. Inside, she found crates stamped with false labels, cover for Grayson's money laundering operation. A laptop, left carelessly on a table, yielded emails linking Grayson to the police union and a directive to neutralize Agent Johnson. Her heart raced as she photographed the evidence, but a creak behind her made her spin, gun drawn. It was Lopez, who'd followed her on a hunch. Thought you might need me, Lopez said, her own weapon ready. You're not the only one who wants Grayson down. Together they secured the evidence, but not before a union thug burst in, gun raised. Lopez tackled him, her training as sharp as Amara's, and they subdued him in seconds. He's one of Grayson's, Lopez said, cuffing the man. Hargrove was just the start. Back at the field office, Amara handed the evidence to Reynolds, who launched an immediate investigation into Grayson. The councilman was arrested that afternoon, his empire crumbling as the warehouse findings and Hargrove's burner phone tied him to the setup. The media exploded, headlines screaming, "Corrupt cop and councilman caught in FBI sting." Amara's name was everywhere, her face a symbol of defiance against a system that tried to break her. But the victory was bittersweet. At home, Amara stared at her reflection, the weight of the night settling in. She'd faced Hargrove's gun, his hatred for her as a black woman in power, and won. Yet the memory of his voice, "Women like you always break," echoed, a reminder of the battles still ahead. She thought of the women he'd hurt, the ones who hadn't had cameras or badges to protect them. A knock at her door startled her. It was Lopez, holding a coffee and a file. "Thought you'd want this," she said, handing over Hargrove's internal affairs report. "He's done. Fired, facing charges, and I'm testifying." Amara nodded, a spark of hope igniting. Lopez, a Latina officer who'd faced her own share of precinct sexism, was an ally, proof that change, however slow, was possible. Amara visited Mrs. Carter the next day, bringing flowers as a thank you. "You're the real hero," Amara said, gripping the older woman's hand. Evelyn smiled, her eyes fierce. "We women have to stick together, don't we?" The moment grounded Amara, a reminder of the community she fought for. As she left, her phone buzzed with a new case file from Reynolds. Grayson's arrest had exposed a wider network, and the FBI needed her. She glanced at the note from Hargrove's pocket, now framed on her desk, a reminder of how close she'd come to losing everything, and how far she'd go to keep fighting. The morning sun cast long shadows across the city as Dr. Amara Johnson stepped into the precinct's hearing room, her FBI badge pinned to her blazer like a medal of war. The air was thick with tension, the kind that comes when truth collides with power. Officer Daniel Hargrove sat at the defendant's table, his uniform replaced by a rumpled suit, his once arrogant smirk gone, replaced by a scowl of defiance. The Internal Affairs panel, a trio of stern-faced investigators, reviewed the evidence. Amara's audio recording, Mrs. Evelyn Carter's viral video, and the burner phone messages linking Hargrove to Victor Grayson's conspiracy. Amara's testimony was unflinching, her voice steady as she recounted the night he'd pulled a gun on her, mocked her badge, and spat gendered slurs. "Missy, sweetheart, just some woman," meant to break her. Each word she spoke landed like a hammer, and Hargrove's face reddened, his hands clenching as his career crumbled. The panel's verdict was swift. Hargrove was fired, his badge stripped, and criminal charges for threatening a federal officer and civilian were filed. As he was led away, his eyes met Amara's, a flicker of hatred still burning, but it was impotent now. The room erupted in murmurs, and Amara caught Sergeant Maria Lopez's nod from the back, a silent salute from a woman who'd fought her own battles against precinct sexism. Outside, the media swarmed, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. The viral video had ignited a firestorm, with justice for Amara trending for days on X. Older male commentators, veterans, retirees, fathers, posted furiously their outrage at Hargrove's cruelty toward Amara and Mrs. Carter, a grandmother who'd risked everything, resonating like a call to arms. "This is why we need reform," one wrote, his words echoing the crowd's anger that night. Amara, though, felt the weight of their support and their scrutiny. She'd become a symbol, whether she wanted to or not. Later that day, Amara met with community leaders at a local church, Mrs. Carter at her side. The room buzzed with residents, many from the neighborhood where Hargrove had tried to break her. Evelyn spoke first, her voice steady despite her age. "We saw a black woman stand tall against a bully with a badge. That's power." The crowd applauded, and Amara felt a lump in her throat. She stood, her words measured but fierce. "This isn't just about me. It's about every woman Hargrove harassed, every person he profiled, every complaint buried to protect him." She outlined plans for a community task force to push for police accountability, emphasizing training to address racial and gender bias. The older men in the room, some with gray hair and military pins, nodded fiercely, their anger at Hargrove's misogyny fueling their commitment to change. One, a retired firefighter, gripped her hand afterward. "My daughter's a cop. She deserves better than men like him." His words hit Amara hard, a reminder of the stakes. The broader fallout was seismic. Victor Grayson's arrest, tied to the warehouse evidence and Hargrove's burner phone, had unraveled his corruption network. The FBI, led by Amara's evidence, charged him with money laundering and obstruction of justice, his political career, reduced to headlines screaming, "Councilman's plot to smear FBI agent exposed." The police union, implicated in the conspiracy, faced federal scrutiny, with several officers linked to Grayson suspended. Amara's investigation, once at risk, of being derailed was now a cornerstone of a larger probe, her name synonymous with courage. But the spotlight brought backlash. Online trolls, some tied to Grayson's allies, accused her of playing the race card or overreacting. Each attack stung, but Amara brushed them off, her resolve hardened by years of navigating bias, racial, gendered, systemic. That evening, Amara visited the FBI Academy, where she'd been invited to speak to new recruits. Among them was a young black woman, Aisha Carter. No relation to Evelyn, but inspired by the same fire. Aisha approached her after, eyes wide. "I saw the video. You didn't back down. How do you keep going?" Amara paused, memories flooding. Back. The male colleague who'd undermined her early in her career, calling her too emotional. The late nights proving her worth. The gun in her face just days ago. "You keep going because you have to," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Not just for you, but for everyone who's counting on you to change things." Aisha nodded. Her jaw set, and Amara saw herself in her, a spark of the future. Back home, Amara sat at her kitchen table, the crumpled note from Hargrove's pocket, now a framed reminder on her wall. It symbolized the conspiracy she'd dismantled, the trap she'd turned against her enemies. But it also held the weight of her survival, a testament to her refusal to break under Hargrove's gun or Grayson's schemes. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lopez. "Hargrove's trial date is set. I'm testifying. You good?" Amara smiled, typing back. "I'm good. Thanks for having my back." Lopez's solidarity, like Evelyn's courage, was a lifeline, proof that she wasn't alone in this fight. The next morning, Amara drove through the same suburban neighborhood, the streetlights now steady, no longer flickering like that fateful night. Mrs. Carter was on her porch, watering her flowers, and waved as Amara passed. A young girl, maybe 10, stood nearby, mimicking Amara's confident stride and saluting her with a grin. Amara laughed, returning the salute, her heart lifting. She glanced at her FBI badge on the passenger seat, its gold surface catching the sunlight. It was more than a shield now. It was a promise, to herself and to every woman, every person who'd faced a Hargrove and survived. The road ahead was long, with new cases and new battles waiting, but Amara was ready. She'd face the worst, and come out stronger, and she'd carry that strength forward no matter what came next.